Could not have a nicer evening for baseball. Tonight it is game number 2 of a 3-game series between the St. Louis Cardinals and the Cincinnati Reds. That's a look at Billy Finley and his crew finishing up the final touches in preparation for game number 2 on the field. That is Rick Horton. I'm Dan McLaughlin, and welcome to St. Louis Cardinals baseball. With the win last night by Cincinnati, these two teams are tied in second place in the NL Central, a half game out. And Rick, when you think about the St. Louis Cardinals, you can look at the bullpen and their struggles. The starters have been unbelievable. Then also maybe you have to look at what's happening with this lineup. Collectively, the Cardinals only hitting .245, and that's got to change.
The Cardinals need to hit better, Dan. They need to hit with runners in scoring position. But even beyond that, they need to hit with power. That's something that's really been missing over the last couple of weeks. The Cardinals with just 19 home runs as a team and only 3 with Holiday, Freese, and Craig combined. And when you're talking about getting through almost the entire month of April with just 3 home runs from those guys, that's not enough.
And something that Mike Matheny will do here tonight is shake things up. There are guys in this lineup that have pretty good numbers against Bronson Arroyo. And Mike Matheny also knows that he needs to get his third baseman going. That's David Freese. He's hitting well below 200. No home runs yet. And that's something that also will jumpstart this offense once he gets going.
Well, he's very important to this club. There's no question about that. Hitting is contagious. Bullpen effectiveness is also contagious. So we want to see those guys improve in the bullpen. A good day yesterday from the Cardinals bullpen. We'll see if they can continue that.
All right, we're just about set to go. The Cincinnati Reds and the St. Louis Cardinals here on Fox Sports Midwest. We'll take a look at that starting 5. It has been dominant so far. Garcia going tonight.
He's always been good in the month of April, and I hope somebody reminded him today it's still April.
Boy, don't we all. Craig is in the lineup, and we've got baseball just around the corner. Win it all for the fans. For every Blues playoff victory, a lucky fan will win an autographed street pole banner. Enter at the Fox Sports Midwest Facebook page. From hockey to baseball, the strength of the Cardinals has been their starting staff. Lance Lynn, 5 starts, 34 strikeouts. He'll try to go to 5-0 tomorrow. Jake Westbrook, only 3 earned runs this season in 27 2/3. How about the rookie, Shelby Miller? Opponents hitting just 189 against him. ERA is barely over 2. And then the ace of the staff, Adam Wainwright, very easily could be 6-0. 44 innings. He has struck out 43. Tonight, it's the lefty at home. That's always good, Jaime Garcia.
And he's pitched very well against the Cincinnati Reds, 8-2 in his career against the Reds. His key, keep the ball down in the strike zone. He's getting more ground balls than any pitcher in baseball, including Westbrook and Wainwright. And he has pitched very well in his career in the month of April.
Brandon Phillips in the lineup. He'll bat cleanup for Dusty Baker's club. He's been in Cincinnati since 2006. The numbers, pretty darn good. You'll see why next. The team acquired Brandon Phillips. Since that time, wearing that red uniform, he has been a Barnes Jewish Hospital difference maker, 2-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove winner. He's won the Silver Slugger, part of that exclusive 30-30 club. Last night, though, the difference was with his glove. Jeff Piccaro, Fox Sports Ohio, caught up with Brandon after the game.
Tell you the truth, I don't know how I made that play, man. I just tried to just dive and just touch the bag, and I was just right when I hit the bag, I was like, please, Holiday, don't kick me in my face, man. I gotta keep on looking good, you know what I'm saying? So I just tried to go out there and make the plays the best way I know how, and I'm just glad that I made the play. It could have been a big inning, and we got the win, I got the out.
Brandon Phillips will bat cleanup tonight for Dusty Baker's club. He's already driven in 24 on the young year. That's a closer look at Brandon Phillips. A record of 2-2. His 33rd career start against St. Louis. Meanwhile, Jaime Garcia, we know he's dominant at home. Overall, a record of 2-1. Last night, the difference in the game against Adam Wainwright, who was very tough. This ground ball to score, Jay Bruce. 2-1 would be the final. And now Mike Matheny and the Cardinals are tied up with Dusty Baker and the Cincinnati Reds inside the NL Central. The Cards, the Reds, next on Fox Sports Midwest. Are waiting, grab some buds. See your Mid-America Chevy dealer or log on to stlchevy.com. Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers, #1 for quality tires and expert auto service. Save big money at Menards on all your home improvement needs. And by Steak and Shake. Steak and Shake, just no equal. Jake Westbrook, Adam Wainwright, those two always having fun inside the dugout. Come on, give me a high five right now. Do it. There you go. Gotta play a little trick on the rookie, huh?
Just trying to be friendly, make sure he feels welcome.
Absolutely. Take a look at this Reds lineup. It's a good one. Shin-Soo Choo has been outstanding thus far in the top 10 of hitting. Then Zach Cozart, Joey Votto had a base hit in the first and an RBI against Wainwright in Game 1. Brandon Phillips, Jay Bruce, Todd Frazier, Devin Mesoraco. Derek Robinson gets the start in left field, and Bronson Arroyo hitless this season. The Cardinals defense brought to you by Dobbs. Holiday, Jay, Beltran in the outfield. Good to see that Jay is starting to heat it up a little bit. It's Carpenter and Cosma on the left side, Descalso, Craig on the right side. Yadi's behind the plate, and it is the lefty Jaime Garcia getting the start, and the second time we've seen him at home against the Reds this year.
Pitches very well at home in his career. Garcia facing a pretty good lineup that's without Ryan Ludwig, who's out for the season, but still a very good Reds lineup. They have their left-handers spread out. Be interesting as we look at the numbers of Garcia, how he fares against these tough lefties. Choo, Votto, Bruce, all very important parts of their lineup. Can he neutralize them with his slider?
Well, the Reds are 3-8 on the road after their win last night. Tied for the fewest road wins by any team in the major leagues. But yet they have been terrific at home. And they've gotten off to quick starts, namely because of this man at the plate, Shin-Soo Choo.
Very good on-base percentage, leads the National League in that department. Swinging at the first pitch a lot in Game 1 of this series, but he takes the first one from Garcia for strike one.
Chu at that .340 average. And that is 8th best in the league. And look at that on-base percentage at .484. I know we asked the fans last night, our Twitter poll, about the leadoff man, speed, on-base percentage, hits, all the various things that you look at, drawing walks, seeing a lot of pitches, and they love with what they've gotten here out of Shin-Soo Choo. He's been everything they expected after making that deal in the offseason.
Cardinal fans got a real close look at Chu in the first series here in St. Louis when he dropped 2 balls in center field. Really not a center fielder. The Reds kind of took a chance. They like his bat. They like him as a leadoff hitter, and they're trying to see if he'll fit as a center fielder.
Alan Craig coming in to make that play. And there's one away. Look at the Cardinals manager Mike Matheny. By the way, he has started to throw batting practice again. His back is feeling much better, getting around the ballpark with greater ease.
And he continues to have a very positive attitude. Talking it over there with Derek Lilliquist, the pitching coach, who has to be happy with what he's seen from the starting pitching this year. How can you not be? But Mike still very calm.
That's not an easy play there by Kozma. Really was between hops as Cozart is the second out. Do you stay back, but you know that Cozart has that good speed, or do you try to come in and get it on the short hop?
You prefer not to have the short hop because they're the toughest ones, but Kozma knew if he didn't charge that ball, he wouldn't have enough time to get Cozart. He's been very steady defensively. In fact, the Cardinals as a team, Dan, not projected to be a good defensive team. Second in the league in terms of fielding percentage. A bit surprising.
Plaza Tire Service replay. You just saw there the glove work by Kozma, and here is Joey Votto. Say that he is a perfectionist. Rarely, if ever, goes out of the zone to chase a pitch. And Jaime going right at him. Strike 2. Cincinnati with the 2 top players in on-base percentage. Chu at .484 and Votto right behind him, .445. Got him to chase there. Votto strikes out. Frustrated with that. The first strikeout for Jaime. He looks sharp here in the first, and there's no score. Trying to jumpstart this lineup collectively at 245. John Jay starting to look a little bit better at the plate, so the Cardinals have put him in the top spot in the lineup at 221. Then Beltran rested yesterday, used as a pinch hitter. Then Holiday, Craig, and Molina Carpenter, Cosma, Descalso, good numbers against this right-hander, and Jaime Garcia. It's Robinson, Chu, and Bruce in the outfield. Frazier, Cozart left side of the infield. Phillips, Votto on the right side. Some pretty lofty numbers put together for Joey Votto at the plate, and both that resume defensively, great player. And there's a look at Bronson Arroyo.
Cardinals very familiar with Arroyo. Has a good curveball, changes speeds with it. His last outing, 6 runs in 6 innings against the Nationals, and a lot of them came early. They jumped on him early. Cardinals hope to do the same.
There's a fly ball lifted into shallow left center field. Chu is over. 1 away. A pitch maker when you describe Bronson Arroyo. Unique leg kick towards the plate. He'll drop the arm angle. It's kind of fun to watch, isn't it?
Al used that word in the pregame, and I think that's exactly right. And I guess pitchmaker would be 2 words. But the reality is, whatever stuff you've got is important, but you've got to do something with it. And Arroyo's the kind of guy that's going to hit corners, as he just did there. He's not going to give in. He'll throw off-speed pitches when he's behind in the count, as good pitchers will do, and he just makes pitches when he needs it.
Beltran beats that shift past Phillips and into right field.
Classic, nice, easy swing of Carlos Beltran. Not much to it, but the ball just jumps off the bat. He'd be one of the Cardinals that you'd say in the power department has kind of lived up to his billing.
Sure.
6 homers, 17 RBIs. Good start for the month of April.
They have come in bunches. Holiday, respectable numbers at 277. Pair of home runs, and he's driven in 14. Outfield is deep. Keys to the game presented by Toyota. This has been an issue for the Cardinals as well. Most double plays hit into this season, 25. They're tied with Miami and San Francisco.
Matt Holliday's hit into 5 of those, up among the league leaders.
And you can make it 6. 4-6-3 on the double play, and just like that, we have 1 inning in the books. No score here in St. Louis. Tickets to a weekend home game. Louisville Slugger bat and a $10 brew house credit. Book today at 655-1234. Visit stlouisarch.hyatt.com. Hyatt Regency St. Louis at the Arch. You're more than welcome. Jaime Garcia 1, 2, 3, top of the first, and in steps Brandon Phillips. And Rick, if you haven't noticed, Mr. Phillips is up to 24 RBIs. How about that?
I have noticed, leading the National League in that department. And he's the guy, I guess you look at this lineup, you don't want to see Joey Votto at the plate, but I'd say Brandon Phillips right there next to him as the guy you'd least like to see with the game on the line at the plate. Other guys can hurt you, Jay Bruce, etc., but those are the guys that just have an awful lot of quality at bats when it matters.
Base hit to the right side, and Phillips is aboard. Those 24 that he has driven in. It's the third best all-time in Reds history for the month of April. The leader is Tony Perez at 26 for the Hall of Famer. Here's Jay Bruce, just 1 home run on the year.
For all the talk of the Cardinals offense being down at 245, that's exactly what the Reds are hitting, 245. In fact, the National League has only one team, Dan, hitting over 264. So at least, I'm not going to call this the year of the pitcher, but it's certainly been a month for pitchers in April here in the National League. Colorado at 285 with 35 home runs as a team. They are not participating. They're getting the job done offensively, and they do have a good lineup. But really been a lot of good pitching starts. Cardinals, Reds, both part of that.
Foul tip and strike one. Couple of sluggers in the ball game tonight. Jay Bruce and Matt Holliday, home runs the last 2 seasons, and where they're at right now, a combined 3. Goes the other way with it. First 2 have reached, and Phillips will stop at second base. Back-to-back singles, and it brings in Frazier.
Perhaps an approach against Jaime Garcia. Take him the other way. That's a pitch out over the plate. Actually off the plate. And just like the pitch that Brandon Phillips hit, just a little bit too much up in the zone. If those pitches are down, they're probably ground balls. Good hitting in both cases.
Here is Todd Frazier. Had a double last night. Also some very good plays down at third. Really became the replacement last year for Scott Rowland. Had a chance to win Rookie of the Year. Scott Rowland right now out of baseball, and we assume that he is retired, at least for the moment. Backhanded by Carpenter, out at second, no play at first base. And they'll get one out.
Actually a pretty nice play by Carpenter and Descalzo to get that runner at second base. It's not the lead runner. You can't get the runner coming into third. Maybe no double play, but double play still in order by getting that middle runner. And a wise decision by Descalzo not to let that ball go. That's the kind of throw that gets airmailed and ends up being a run.
One out and runners at first and third. This is what you need, the double play. 6, 4, 3. It's a double play. Nice work by Jaime Garcia. The first 2 reach, no damage. Midway through 2, no score. your dream job. You could be the next Fox Sports Midwest girl. Log on to foxsportsmidwest.com/girls for details and the chance to be the next Fox Sports Midwest girl. Here is Alan Craig as we move to the home half of the second, and there's no score.
Dan, you mentioned, and we had a graphic with Holiday and Jay Bruce having their power numbers down from a year ago. You can really add Alan Craig to that list. He had 22 home runs last year for the Cardinals and was hurt some, so he had very good production and still looking for his first home run, but he does have a high RBI total. Always been good with runners in scoring position, especially with 2 outs.
So Craig, despite the fact he has not homered this year, still though with 18 RBIs. Little liner that is caught it short by Cozart as Craig broke his bat, and there's one away. And it brings in Yadier Molina. Rick, I was emceeing a function today here at the ballpark, and we know that Mike Matheny, when it's brought up to him about his playing career, he always say, I wasn't very good, couldn't hit, couldn't do this, couldn't do that. Mike Matheny caught nearly 5,000 innings while wearing a Cardinal uniform. He committed a total of 12 errors. 5,000 innings, 12 errors. That's amazing.
Well, it's the reason he has the 4 gold gloves and the respect of so many people throughout baseball, including the man standing at the plate, Yadier Molina, who learned a lot from him. Not just about the errors. I mean, errors is one thing, but we've been talking throughout the past couple of weeks about things that Yadi does that Mike used to do that save runs and don't become a statistic. Blocking balls, keeping the other team from running, the help that you give to your pitching staff. Catcher is a critical member of every team, and that's why so many catchers are big league managers.
And Yadi shoots it foul.
Joe Girardi, Mike Scioscia, Jim Leland was a catcher.
Understanding of pitching staffs may be better than some. As Molina turns on that pitch and picks up the base hit. Down and in. Drop the barrel and picks up the hit into left.
That's 4 hits in a row for Yadier Molina, who looked locked in game 1 of this series. And this pitch, you're right, down and in. He just drops the bat head, turns on it. Actually, not even a strike. Our Plaza Tire service, Fox mode.
And here is Matt Carpenter. Carpenter has been all over this Cardinals lineup. Leadoff. He's been the second man. He's batted 7th.
I go both ways on that argument, and I understand people who want somebody to stick in one place because they think they get more comfortable there. And then you've got the other side of the argument, Dan, that says, look, he's hitting against Bronson Arroyo. What difference does it make? Once the game starts, whether you're second, fourth, I mean, really, you're still the same thing. And I think there's some truth to both. I think when you're in a certain spot in the lineup, there's a certain expectation that goes along with that you might put on yourself. If you're a leadoff hitter, you're going to take some more pitches. You're going to be concerned about getting on base. If you're in that third spot, you're going to be driving in runs. And so I think that's part of it. But the reality is he's standing here at the plate trying to hit Bronson Arroyo. It doesn't matter where he's hitting in the lineup for the most part.
2 balls and no strikes. And that's a fair ball. Votto, what a play here as Yadi tries to get into a rundown to get back to the bag. And he will. Heads up play from 2 All-Stars. One, Votto, the footwork there to make the play. And then Molina, the heads up play to realize he could go back to the bag at first.
Acrobatic play to start with from Votto. I mean, that was pretty impressive what he was able to do. And once he steps on the bag, there's no force. That means Yadi doesn't have to go to second. and he's not sure whether he should or not by the time we get to right about here, so he just kind of hits the dirt. Now he's got to figure which base can I scamper back to more quickly, and he picks first. I think he made the right choice. Close play, good call.
Go back to a couple years ago when you had that play in which he knew which runner was out at third in Pittsburgh. You remember the play I'm talking about? And it's one of those where you had two runners on the bag, and basically Yachty knew the rule, which runner was out, and kind of deked the other one into thinking that he was out and got a double play out of it. I mean, it was one of the great plays and cerebral plays you'll see a player make. Flip to second, and Brandon Phillips is there. Jump ahead to the third. Robinson, Arroyo, and Chu coming up. Your neighborhood hometown grocer. The Chipotle Chicken Club Combo is back for a limited time at Jack in the Box. Try one today with fries and a drink for just $4.99 plus tax. And the Cardinals, Fox Sports, and the state of Missouri are teaming up to help you stop smoking. For more information, call the Quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. These guys that work with us in the truck, I mean, they are on it. This is the play we're talking about.
They found it. That's Trevor Miller, and you get two guys in a rundown. You get two guys on the base. Whose base is it? It's the lead runner. He's supposed to be safe, so you get him to go off the bag. You tag him again. Now he really is out, and you end up getting a double play. More than you bargained for.
Here is Derek Robinson again. Explain that. It is the lead runner's bag.
So the lead runner owns that base, and what you do is you tag him while he's on the base to convince him that he's out, even though he isn't. And then when he gets off the base, you tag him again, and now he's really out.
So the one that would have been out in that replay
was the trail runner,
McCutchen. I believe it was McCutchen who was running on that.
Well, watch the trail runner. McCutchen, the minute there's two guys on this base, McCutchen is now out right now. But you tag the lead runner, and I'm not sure if that's Neil Walker or who that is. You tag him again, it's LaRoche, and now he's really out. Now they're both out.
And Brendan Ryan
he was out too.
Giggling like a... just leave it there. It's Brendan Ryan.
We love Brendan Ryan here, and he could pick it. And he was certainly from another planet at times.
I love being around the guy.
Oh, I know.
And I know that he drove his teammates crazy. I get it. But he was a talent defensively.
Still is.
Some believe best defensive shortstop in the game. And the one thing that's really surprised me, though, in his career, you get a look at Robinson, who does have pretty good speed down there, the 8th place hitter and a single. But the thing that surprises me about Brendan is that he has not hit any better than what he has shown the last 2 or 3 years, because he hit okay in the minor leagues. He initially hit okay here in St. Louis, but it just has not worked out, and the Cardinals traded him for Michael Clato.
Jaime Garcia, Dan, has now thrown 17 pitches, and only 2 of them have been out of the strike zone. So he is sharp in the early going. He has given up 3 scratch hits in this game. And I would think that Garcia, standing 60 feet away from him, would be a pretty tough guy to bunt with all the movement that he has.
Here's the 0-1 pitch. Make it 0-2. With 2 strikes still, Carpenter, third baseman tonight, in on the grass as they hold at first. The St. Louis Blues, playing their first playoff game of many, have taken a 1-0 lead down the street. Power play goal, Alex Steen at 9:05, and the assist from defenseman Kevin Shattenkirk.
Something tells me that gentleman was already aware of that.
I don't know what gave it away. I think right now he's saying, you know, wouldn't mind being home watching the Blues on Fox Sports Midwest, but I got a pretty good seat, so how could I give this thing up right behind the dugout?
He's looking for somebody.
Yeah. Everybody else said the heck with it. We're staying home. Here's a 1-2 pitch. A strikeout of Bronson Arroyo. So Jaime Garcia, first time through the lineup, strikes out 2 and gives up 3 base hits.
So the movement of Jaime Garcia and Arroyo trying to bunt it, that late movement dips right underneath his bat. He had a good bat angle for a while, but then when it went down, instead of going down with his knees, he tilted the bat down, which is not the proper bunting technique. If the ball's lower, Dan, if it's going to go low, you bend your knees, not the bat angle.
Replay brought to you by Hyundai. Back to the top of the lineup, Shin-Soo Choo. Long look by Garcia. Time is called. We were told of a neat story today here at the ballpark about Shin-Soo Choo. Chris Welsh, the color analyst of the Cincinnati Reds, had an interview with Red, and Choo said, "Who's that guy?" He said, "Who's that guy?" He said, "That's Red Shandies. He's one of the all-time greats. He's in the Hall of Fame. Matter of fact, you look out on that wall, that's him as a young man. Now 90 years of age and still getting around the ballpark very, very well. Shocking that he's 90. Looks great at the ballpark every day." And Choo said, "Be kind of neat to meet him, but I'm too nervous. I don't want to go over there and meet Red. There's no way. I can't do this." And Chris Welsh told him about all the stats and the championships, the rings, the fact that he was a manager, all the great things he's done in the game, and had a chance to meet the great Red Shandies. And we're told he came away just stunned. And then the one question he said I forgot to ask him was, "Will you please teach me something?"
How about that? Great line. And also in that story, Chris shared that Red was very gracious because he understood that Choo was nervous and was kind of scared to approach him. So, you know, Red, very affable and likable, and was able to put him at ease, as Red has done for so many of us that have been around Cardinal baseball, because there are times where you sit there and think, you know, this guy's a legend, and yet he's just a regular guy.
Down to earth, not a big deal. There's Chris Welsh on the left. One ball and one strike on Choo. Ground ball. Craig will tag out Chu for the out. Advancing on the play, it's Robinson to second base. He's in scoring position. MLB.TV is celebrating 11 years, so you can join the millions of fans and subscribe right now. Watch every out-of-market game live online on your favorite mobile devices in HD quality. With MLB.TV Premium, visit MLB.TV today. Baseball is everywhere, so I'm going to ask you this question. You're a player. You're in this organization. Was there anybody that you were nervous, even as a grown-up, as a young man, a player that you thought, man, I get a chance to meet this guy? I'm a little nervous doing that.
Well, I was nervous when I met Bob Gibson, and I'm still nervous when I talk to Bob Gibson.
I can't blame you there.
But that's a little different reason. Bob can be very intimidating, although actually I love connecting with him. He's still a fan of the Cardinal franchise and watches a lot of games, travels quite a bit, but still very much engaged in everything Cardinal.
0-2 on Cozart.
First time I met Bruce Sutter in spring training. First time as a rostered player, I had a chance to meet him, and he was a big star at the time. He could not have been more gracious. And I think that's the example of somebody like Red that I was kind of afraid to talk to, but he made it not a big deal in about 5 seconds.
1-2 the count. 10 of 11 first pitch strikes, and Jaime nearing 30 pitches. Majority of those have been strikes. Always good to see. Now he's going through the second time through the lineup. You were a starter at one point in your career. How much do you want to mix it up now, second time through?
Well, you may have to think of a plan B, mixing it in. Although if plan A keeps working, you might want to stay with that too. And I think sometimes pitchers outthink themselves with that, Dan. I think, yes, there's something to showing them other looks, but you have to do that within every at bat anyway. I mean, you can't just throw the ball down and away 6 times and get away with that. So you're always mixing up, even within an at bat. Second time through, you may try to get him out with a different pitch.
1-2 towards the middle. Descalso, nice play to his right, shows off the arm as he settles in and makes that play. Midway through 3, and there's no score. Player do you look forward to seeing most? Great question tonight, presented by AT&T. Head to Twitter, have the chance to vote for John Gast. Oscar Taveras, Michael Waka, or Colton Wong. He's off to a good start as well. AT&T Twitter poll.
You know, it's fun, Dan, when we talk about these players that are in the minor leagues, we get a lot of indication from friends of theirs and on Twitter that they are loving it. They love the fact that we're talking about them. And speaking of loving it, how about the good defense with two hands of Daniel Descalzo? That ball started to ride up on him a little bit. He was able to kind of corral it with both hands. Very nice play to end that last inning.
Flies out to left to start the home half of the third. Cardinals defense, we know about Descalso, pretty sure-handed. One of the guys that you'd say is a plus defender. And as you talked about, coming into this season, if there was a aspect of the team I think a lot of the so-called experts and scouts looked at, they said, well, the defense for the Cardinals may be down. We really haven't seen that, have we?
Well, we haven't seen it, especially in terms of fielding percentage. If you'd have said through the month of April that the Cardinals would have maybe a handful of teams, I think there's 4 with less home runs than the Cardinals, and there'd only be 1 with a better fielding percentage, I think we'd have said you're crazy. That's not going to happen. Thought power would have been more of a defining characteristic of this team, and defense would not be. So, credit the Cardinals with all the fundamental things done in spring training to just catch the ball you're supposed to catch.
There's a broken bat. Jaime Garcia, Cozart over to first, and there's 2 outs.
Now, it doesn't mean, Dan, that the Cardinals and I mean, I'd be dishonest to say that the Cardinals have a lot of players with a lot of range. They don't defensively. This is not a team that has great range in the infield or in the outfield for that matter. But if you catch the ball you're supposed to catch, that keeps you away from big innings. It keeps your pitcher from having to get 4 or 5 outs in an inning. And that's how you win.
Now it's the top of the lineup and John Jay. Let's check in with Jim Hayes. What do you have, Jimmy?
Dan, the Cards are hitting .327 with runners in scoring position, best in baseball, but the hitting hasn't been so timely of late. April 1st through the 16th, the Cards hitting .395 with runners in scoring position. Since April 16th, just .236. Mike Matheny says you can't expect them to hit .400 all season, and he says throughout the course of a season there's peaks and valleys, but he thinks it'll bounce back.
And then to follow up on that, I don't think you can expect the Cardinals to be hitting as a team, let's say 245, and Craig no home runs, Freese no home runs. Those things will balance themselves out, you would assume as well, going in the right direction.
And I still think power a big part of that. And yes, you want to be clutch, but you hit 1 3-run home run in the 7th inning, and we all forget about the left on base
right
before that and after.
It's amazing. 2 days ago we're talking about the bullpen, and now we're talking about the lack of offense. It's such a long season, and the ups and downs of it.
And Dan, 2 days before that, we were talking about just how good this team was, because the Cardinals had the 4th best record in all of baseball, and they were 6 games over 500. Now with a 3-game losing streak, it doesn't feel quite as good, but it'll change again about 10 more times. Part of the roller coaster ride emotionally of a fan following their favorite baseball team. And I mentioned earlier, Mike Matheny's been very even keel throughout this last week or 2.
Ooh, just missed, and John Jay draws the walk. And the shot of Chris Welsh in the booth over there to our right. It's a good friend Bucky in the background eating an ice cream cone about as big as him. Bucky helps us out day in and day out, and I'll tell you what, that's a lot of scoops.
We caught him.
We sure did. Eating ice cream on the job. Beltran, deep right field. Bruce is back at the wall, just enough room, and he makes the catch. Cardinals strand a runner. No score as we enter the 4th. No score as the top of the fourth rolls in, along with Rick Horton, Jim Hayes, Pat Paris, Al Raboski. I'm Dan McLaughlin. Kim Eberly filling in tonight for Tim Garcia. We've had more help tonight than we've had in the last, 10 to 15 years. Here's Joey Votto. He'll lead it off, and Votto struck out on 3 pitches, first time up.
Not a good at-bat for him at all. Garcia finished him off with a breaking pitch down and away. See how he starts him off. Right down central.
Interesting that Jaime is gone right after Joey Votto. 4 pitches right at him.
You mentioned Votto, one of those guys that doesn't really like to fool around in the batter's box. He's ready to go. Doesn't really kind of step out, walk around. He fouls the ball off. He's ready to hit.
I love that. Also has the air of confidence when you do that too, I think.
I agree. As he steps out of the box and walks around.
Rarely, if ever, do you see him do that. Stays in the box and he's ready to hit. So I'm talking to himself in the 2-2. Little tapper, tough play here. Descalso, gloves. Can't get it out of the glove. And it's a base hit for Joey Votto. And again, runners on here for Cincinnati.
That's 3 innings in a row that the Reds have their leadoff runner aboard. Phillips hit in the second, Derek Robinson in the third, and now Joey Votto, and this ball right off the end of the bat. Garcia falling off to the third base side. Really, he's got no chance, and Descalso would have had to be as quick as could be just to get it out of his glove. Maybe barehanding that ball might have been an option, but really that was just a tough play for Descalso, and ball hit in the right spot as far as Votto's concerned.
Brandon Phillips. Short lead at first by Votto. And that's taken for a strike.
A lot of those from Garcia.
A good friend, Larry Walker, watching the ball game tonight. And Larry wanted to make sure and text me that Canadians just want to make sure and get in that batter's box and a hit. No wandering allowed. And I would say that Larry did that pretty darn well.
Little Bird has told me that Larry is considering coming to our fantasy camp.
I heard he's in.
Well, I wasn't sure whether the final verdict was in, but sure am hoping for that. He will have a blast, and the campers will love to see him. That camp we do every year in January, the Cardinals Fantasy Camp, and go to the website to get the information, and I can't say strongly enough how much fun you'll have if you choose to come to that camp.
0-2. Lifted out to left center field. Jay makes the catch, and Votto draws a throw, but he'll stay put. By the way, Larry's still on the fence. 75% yes. So still not 100%. We're at Busch Stadium in St. Louis. Dan, Rick, Jim with you. Glad you're with us. And here is Jay Bruce. Wasn't sure if Larry had healed up from that vicious brawl in the World Baseball Classic. Those tough Canadians. They're tough. A lot of them play hockey, but then there's guys like Larry Walker. But the one thing you have to have, though, is Jay Bruce looks at a strike. If you go to fantasy camp, you got to have a little bit of a personality, and unfortunately, Larry may be on the outside looking in.
You're trying to get that extra 25% sold, aren't you?
I want him there. Larry would be an all-timer if he was there. What a great guy. And hilarious.
And we have that pretty well cornered with Steve Klein, Dave LaPointe, and John Costello, but we could use a little more.
I would bet, too, if Larry Walker grabbed a bat Back felt around 75%. He probably hit about 300 right now. Just a natural, gifted, tremendous major league player. One of the real good people. Unfortunately, didn't play long enough here in St. Louis. Here's the 0-2. There's a strikeout. Well, you can show off your Cardinals spirit in style. It's a cap with the new Cardinals alternate logo, courtesy of U.S. Cellular, the official wireless provider of the St. Louis Cardinals. 25,000 fans 16 and older receive the adult cap at the Friday, May 17th game. Cards and Brewers, cardinals.com/promotions. Tonight is one of those college nights. Hopefully the students and faculty have taken advantage of the discounted tickets. I noticed earlier before our open you were wearing your college tank top that you received. You came through the turnstiles. You look great, Rick.
Thanks, Dan.
1-0 pitch to Todd Frazier instead of check on the runner. Sean Casey wear number 21? You know, he's now a Reds Hall of Famer.
Is he?
Yes. Inducted into their Hall of Fame. Sean Casey. Barry Larkin is in the Hall of Fame. There's a grounder left side. Carpenter makes the play. Cardinals have the big bats coming up. That means it's Holiday, Craig, and Molina. They could do some damage. We'll see coming up. Stop improving. Well, this season against the Reds, that ninth inning opening day loss, 9 runs allowed. But since that time, only 3 runs allowed. So quite the difference.
And in that game, Dan, Jaime Garcia was the starter and had 10 strikeouts in that game. Really deserved a victory, left with a lead. And there have been a couple of times where Garcia's had games that he should have won. The bullpen lost for him, so good day for him that day, and another good start for him here tonight.
Ground out by a Holiday, and it brings in Craig. Talking with Cardinals front office today, and a lot of talk about what's happened here with the offense. And under Mark McGwire, the team really put up some outstanding numbers. Average home runs, the RBIs, the on-base percentage was good. And you do have a new hitting coach that's been promoted in John Mabry. And you know, Mabry was telling me in spring training that 5 other organizations, he confirmed this to me after Mike Matheny had said this, 5 other organizations contacted the Cardinals for similar spots that Mabry is in right now. And remember, John was, before McGwire, the first baseman here in St. Louis, and then becomes a guy that so many teams could rely on to play various positions, both leagues, as this has popped up. And Mabry said, nope, I'm not going anywhere. I have a loyalty to Mike and certainly to the St. Louis Cardinals. George Kissel taught me how to play this game. He said, I owe it to the organization to be a coach and to do it in Major League Baseball, but to do it with the St. Louis Cardinals.
And he's going to help this team get better. I think he's the right guy to do it. And for those that miss Mark McGwire, I think that's reasonable. Mark, a big part of this franchise for a long time too. But I should remind those people that want Mark to come back here, the Dodgers are also hitting 245 as a team, and they have 100 million reasons to be hitting better. Or more.
Or a lot more. Molina single to left his first time up. 2 balls and no strikes. No score here at Busch Stadium in St. Louis. Dan Kaplan, the longtime GM of the Westin, right across the street, is leaving St. Louis, and he's here at the ballpark tonight. We wish him well.
Strong arms of Matt Holliday. The vibration of the bat. How about that shot?
Here's a 2-2. Spoiled by Molina.
It's a very Tony Gwynn-like swing by Yadier Molina. A pitch he really couldn't put into play, so I'll just on purpose foul it off and make him throw me another one.
Here's a 2-2. Big gap in left center field for Molina. We noticed in the home opening series here at Busch Stadium how deep Chu plays in center field. And you can also see that from Robinson out left. As Yadi skies one into left field. Robinson is there. We've got a pitcher's duel here tonight. 2 good teams. Cincinnati, St. Louis, no score. We jump ahead to the 5th. Arroyo at 90, Garcia at 90. Throw me in the group, Rick Horton, that is enamored with velocity. I love to see it, but I also like to see guys that know how to pitch, and we're seeing that tonight.
I'm in the group that loves zeros on the scoreboard if you're talking about a pitcher making pitches, and velocity often helps that, Dan, but it's not the only thing. And we see two guys tonight who've been pitch makers without that 95 plus, but they've got the movement and location. And Garcia especially has been really, really sharp, less than 10 pitches out of the strike zone.
There's a base hit into center, so again, he'll work from the stretch. He's primarily done that in this ball game tonight.
We talked about his ground ball percentage being the best in all of baseball. In fact, it's really interesting. The Cardinals are 1, 2, 3 in that department. Garcia, Westbrook, Wainwright in all of baseball in terms of getting the ball hit on the ground. And that goes back to our defensive comment, how important the defense is when pitchers are doing that. Ability to get that double play when you need it.
Cardinals have been able to turn one double play tonight. To be a hard hit ball here for Derek Robinson to turn two with him. He's got very good speed. Two and 0. Ground ball to the right side. Descalso able to get the lead man. Runner at first, and that'll bring in Bronson Arroyo.
Descalso doing what we saw earlier, using two hands, and also what we saw earlier, the Cardinals infield getting that lead runner so you can keep the double play in order. Arroyo should be bunting here. Always good to get that lead guy if possible.
Carpenter way in on the grass, down at third as they'll hold it first. Outfield is straight away. Rick, you and I know very well Cindy Richards, who works here, longtime employee of the St. Louis Cardinals, and Lauren Murphy, 25-year-old woman who was hit by a car while jogging in L.A. on a business trip. This has been a well-publicized tragic story, and she's in a coma, has 6 other siblings here in St. Louis, so there is a great need for money because they're trying to help out with medical expenses, also the family going to L.A. to and from. And if folks are watching throughout Cardinal Nation, please just look up the name of Lauren Murphy, and there's various websites that you can donate to and to help out the family. They're a tremendous family here in St. Louis, and God bless them and everything that they're going through. So hopefully folks can help them out. Our thoughts and prayers are with them.
Yeah, just a horrible situation. Good friends of ours from St. Louis, Adam and Jana Timmerman, who used to play for the Rams here, very connected to that family as well. And so a lot of folks concerned and praying for her and her family.
Arroyo is at the plate. No balls and 2 strikes. Pitch count only at 48. That's it with 1 out here in the top of the 5th for Jaime Garcia. Arroyo gets the bunt down. Carpenter will throw to first, and Molina always heads up. He's down hustling, covering third. Well, fans, you've known for years, StubHub, great place to find the seats you want to see the Cardinals games, and you can see them live. Now they've added StubHub fan rewards, so you can earn a little extra with your tickets, like seat upgrades. Head to StubHub and get your Cardinals tickets right now.
Arroyo could not get the bunt down in the 3rd inning, but he does a nice job here in the 5th to give the Reds a chance to get on the board. With Chu at the plate, he does have 10 RBIs. And the low pitch count of Garcia, something
thought about when you thought about this day with Garcia on the mound? There are times, Dan, where he's been out there for 5 2/3, 6 1/3 innings, and the pitch count has been a problem for him. Already up into 80, 90, 100 pitches, but he's being very economical here tonight, and that's really Garcia at his best.
Here's a 1-0 pitch to Chu. Now you have Cozart, who's on deck. 0 for 2. And came in hitting just .216. You're dealing with Chu at the plate. Top on-base percentage in the league. He's in the top 8 of hitting. Not saying you give in to him, but yet be awfully careful.
And I like pitching to him only because you got the left-on-left advantage.
Chu drives it into left center field, and this is trouble. The Reds will get on the board. That's off the wall. And Chu arrives at second base, giving the Reds a 1-run lead. RBI number 11 for the Reds leadoff man, Shin-Soo Chu.
Well, the left-on-left advantage not exploited by Garcia. Makes a pitch up in the zone, and Chu shows his power the other way. It's a curveball, really not a bad pitch, and not up that much. In fact, looking at that a second time, it looked to be a little sharper breaking ball than when we saw it live, so I guess that's one of those cap tippers. We got that expression over the years. We learned that, Dan, from Tony La Russa, because in the post-game sound, among all the other fun things that he would say and do,
fun,
you were never quite sure whether he would give credit to the other pitcher or say, look, we got to do what we've got to do, or he would use the term cap tipper, and he would either acknowledge that the other team was better, or he would say we've got to be better ourselves, and kind of would go back and forth between the two. So never a dull moment on the post games with Tony La Russa. Tony TV.
Rick, that's just too fresh.
Too fresh for Jim Hayes,
yeah.
maybe.
Another Tony saying. That's 3-0 now on Cozart. You're asking for trouble with Votto on deck. Might be a touchy situation. You'd ask Tony about it. Ooh, too fresh.
And I also love the Tony expression when you suggest an alternate way to have handled a strategy in a particular situation. His great line would be, I'd love to manage against you.
You just went the long way to describe second guessing.
That's
An
right.
alternate way to maybe manage and look at a situation.
Well, sometimes it's a first guess.
Right.
And I think that's what we try to do even as we're going through a telecast is try to understand what's going through the mind of Mike Matheny. And it's easy for folks, and many will criticize him at the end of the game because he did something that didn't work out. Well, he doesn't have the ability of looking at it in the rearview mirror. He's got to decide right now. And to help folks understand just what a big league manager goes through in terms of the decisions that he has. And there's no one way. And we learned that from Tony. You learn that from being around baseball. There's no one way. It's a feel thing. I've often said, Dan, that playing for Tommy Lasorda, he was an emotional manager, and he would manage on emotional decisions. Whitey Herzog was tactical. I think Tony La Russa was a combination of both of those things, and I think Mike Matheny is developing his own particular style. And I would bet he would be more the tactical type than the emotional type.
Sure. Count is 3-2 on Zach Cozart. Chu is the runner at second base. Cozart is over 2 with a pair of groundouts, and now Garcia and Molina want to make sure they're on the same page with this pitch. And it is a big pitch because it's either you're out of the inning or you're dealing with Joey Votto with 2 runners on. Derek Lilliquist and the Cardinals hoping that they'll get Jason Mott back at some point. He has extended some of his throwing. You know, at one point you're at 90 feet, then you're at 120. And then at that point you start to air it out and see what you have. And we know about Mott, that violent delivery, and you wonder how much that also plays into what he's dealing with in the ailment in the elbow.
And as I've said, Dan, hopeful, but I'm pessimistic. Just know it's just a kind of a long shot at this point that he would have been able to heal with just a little bit of rest with the kind of pain he was dealing with, but sure hoping for that.
The 3-2 and positioned perfectly. It's Carpenter over to Craig. Chu with the RBI double, but coming up leads the league in runs scored. Matt Carpenter next on Fox Sports Midwest. $150 calories. Now just $1 at McDonald's.
You made me hungry the way you said that. Well done, Dan McLaughlin.
Chu is given the Reds a 1-run lead. Arroyo's allowed just 2 base hits, and again we're talking about an offense that is stagnant tonight. Just 2 hits.
Cardinals in danger of losing the series with a loss here tonight. And Dan, the last 28 times that these two teams have played here in St. Louis, this is a staggering number to me. 28 series here in St. Louis between the Reds and the Cardinals. The Reds are 3-23-2. So they've split 2 series and they've only won 3 out of the last 28. That's just amazing, and it's consistency, and I'm sure those are numbers that Dusty Baker is very well aware of.
Carpenter waits on the pitch, backhanded. Oh, nice play by Votto, just leading Arroyo perfectly. He's had a couple of really good plays down at first.
He's kind of looked like an ex-quarterback a couple of times on his footwork when he makes throws. He goes to his right and a little screen pass out into the flat.
No, you were happy about the Rams draft?
I was.
A couple playmakers the Rams picked up as Cosmo will dig in with 1 down. Cosma base hit out to left. And he's 1 for 2, the third Cardinal hit tonight. We want to remind you it's day baseball tomorrow here on Fox Sports Midwest. Come your way at noon. Homer Bailey roughed up in his last start here in town. Career record of 3-8 against St. Louis. And Lance Lynn getting the start for the Cardinals. And Lynn trying to go to 5-0. It's been a long time since he has lost a game. Have to go back to last season. He seemed to really been in a nice groove since the beginning of the year. Kind of a rough spring. Maybe the weight loss had something to do with mechanics, but bottom line, he looks pretty good.
I think pretty much everybody would trade that rough spring for a good April.
Oh, yeah, I would say so. Descalso, a bouncer to Votto, fires it to second, on to first, and safe. We've seen a little bit of everything here tonight from Votto, aren't we? Defensively, another good play. 3-6 on that play, and it brings in Garcia.
Off balance throw. Again, getting the lead runner very important, and they almost got 2. Tough for a pitcher to find the base, catch the ball, do it all at one time. You have to go by feel. You just know where the base is instinctively.
So 2 outs and a runner at first. That changeup that time by Arroyo.
Garcia is certainly capable of keeping this inning going, looking for his first hit of the season, but we saw an improved hitter a year ago with Garcia. Shortened his swing a bit. He's always looked comfortable at the plate. He always looks like he can cover the strike zone well.
Arroyo makes the play. And the Cardinals are done in the home half of the 5th. Cincinnati leads it by a run. Weekend, May 11th and the 12th. Saturday, the ladies will take home the AT&T. Look at that on the left. That AT&T pink lady style Mike Matheny full button down jersey. Also that sun cap, the floppy sun hat presented by Diet Coke and Schnucks. Colorado, St. Louis, the 11th and the 12th. Away we go here in the 6th inning, and Joey Votto.
Dan, close ball game in game 1 of this series. Reds closed out the Cardinals with Chapman in the 9th inning. And a close ball game here in game 2, but the reminder of what they've got out there in the 9th inning. So you don't want to kind of have it be too close, and certainly don't want to be trailing going into really the 8th and the 9th. This bullpen very good at the back end for Cincinnati, and so the Cardinals running out of chances to get them before it's Chapman time.
Yeah, it really shortens the game. There's no doubt about it.
Everybody on that Cardinal bench too very conscious of that, Dan, and you may not be verbalizing that, but every player feels that.
Slowly hit to the right side. And let's take a look at our carsoup.com email the booth question. What are the factors that are keeping Chapman a reliever? This is from Terry, Lake St. Louis. Our carsoup.com email the booth question.
Actually, Walt Jocketty, the general manager, was really the champion of seeing if he could be a starter in spring training, and they tried that through midway through spring training, and Dusty wasn't quite so sure about that. Chapman was at one point kind of pro trying it, and he had actually said that to an interpreter because he's still learning the language, that yeah, I would try starting. But he had a start in spring training where after the game he came out and he said very plainly to everybody, they said, well, how'd you like starting? He goes, I don't like starting. I'm a reliever. I'm a closer. And said it very clearly. And Dusty Baker didn't know about it until later when the press came to him and said, did you know Chapman said that? And he said, well, we'll see about fixing that. And from that day on, he went back into being a reliever. So I think the biggest factor is that's what he wants to do, and he has been energized by that. He's taken a few miles per hour off his fastball, throwing strikes, and he just believes that he's got the mentality to be a closer, and he loves the adrenaline of it. And so I think, honestly, that's the biggest factor now. He's got the stuff to be a starter, yes, but he's got the heart of a closer right now.
0-2 and a mistake by Garcia as Phillips singles up the middle. You know, Chapman, by the way, when he was signed by Cincinnati, that's a 6-year deal through the 2015 season. So they've got their closer locked up, and in baseball terms, relatively cheap for the kind of numbers he's putting up.
You know, I think Walt Jocketty's thinking, and a lot of people would say it makes some sense to ponder that, is you're getting, what, 50, 60 innings out of a guy that's your most dominating player. What if we got more innings out of him? Wouldn't that be better? And especially if he's got the kind of stuff and the multiple pitches to be able to handle a starting role. And all that makes a lot of sense, but when you can shorten the game, as you say, you're influencing every night. Every night you're influencing the outcome of a close ball game.
We're talking about Tony La Russa before, and this is Jay Bruce. You know, he would talk about if it wasn't the most important position on the field or role, it's one of the top 1 or 2, as they have a pickoff play here. Phillips in the rundown. Oh, my. Phillips still in the rundown. That's not how you do it.
Wow. Phillips is going to argue that he was interfered with by Daniel Descalso, and he may have a point. If he was slowed down at all by Descalso by running into him, if he ran into him before Descalso caught the ball, it's interference. And That's what he's saying. He's trying to make his point. Chris Spire trying to get him out of the way. And any way you look at it, that was an ugly effort on the rundown, but a good pickoff for Garcia. So it's all good at the beginning, as he's able to read that Phillips is taken off. Now way too many throws. They're not closing the gap enough. They're just throwing too quickly. And that throw from Cosma, not good. And does he run into him? No, he doesn't. That was.
And also, did he miss the tag? I think he's saying he missed the tag now, Rick, looking at it from that angle.
Well, he's trying to hit Descalzo, and he did miss the tag, and he might have hit Descalzo both.
Either way, I think the Cardinals catch a break.
No question. And the way you do a rundown is you close the gap with both the guy you're throwing to, and you need to be running towards him, and just not a picture-perfect attempt there, but at least they got the job done, got the out.
I think I have this right. It goes 1 3 6 3 6 1 4. 1 3 6 3 6 1 4.
I'm just writing down one too many. Maybe I should put 3 too many.
That's
throws.
Yeah, 3 or 4. Either way, the Cardinals pick up the out. Nobody on. 2 outs, 1 ball and 2 strikes on Jay Bruce. Bruce tonight has singled and also struck out. Last time up back in the 4th. Shallow center. John Jay makes the catch. Cardinals have the top of the lineup coming up. Only 3 hits tonight, down by a run. Who do you want to see? John Gast, Oscar Taveras, Michael Wacha, Colton Wong. Cardinals have jumped from the 30th ranking in the minor leagues to #1, and yet doing it with a couple of world championships in the last 5 years. And so our fans are saying Michael Wacha. Now, I know a lot of fans are looking at the bullpen and saying, why not Wacha right now? And a valid point is this. Just using Adam Wainwright as an example, and people compare, as John Jay takes a strike, compare Wacha to Wainwright. You know, Waino was down in the minor leagues for, I believe it was 4.5 seasons. Lance Lynn, a couple of years. They would love to have those guys stay down because these guys up here are performing. However, if it gets to that point where you've got to make the move, sometimes you got to do it.
Well, if you're training and developing Michael Wacha to be a big league starter too? You have that question.
Jay lifts it into left. By the way, Tavares is playing at center field, natural right fielder. It's Carlos Beltran.
Cardinals need some extra base hits. Big shift in the infield again for Cincinnati. Shortstop Cozart just barely on the left side, and way off the line at third is Frazier.
Beats the shift again with a base hit into right. The Krispy Kreme doesn't deal. Cardinals get 9 hits tonight. You're invited into Krispy Kreme tomorrow. You'll receive a dozen of their original glazed donuts for only $3.99. And you can stop by one of the 4 St. Louis area Krispy Kremes for this sensational deal.
Or you can stop by the booth.
They were brought in tonight. Inside to Matt Holliday.
One of the perks, Dan.
The good folks at Ted Drew's will be making a stop on Wednesdays throughout the season. Not that I have it down on my calendar that they'll be here by 9 a.m. Inside, and it's 2 balls and no strikes on Holliday. Alan Craig is on deck. Had a shot of all those guys that been at Memphis the last year or so. Tom Mee, our director, showing us and leading the way. Matt Adams there on the left. And Adams, we understand, should be in uniform. Hopefully, fingers crossed, all goes to plan next Tuesday. Working out on the field earlier this afternoon with Jose Oquendo. Be nice to get that bat back in the lineup. Really improves your bench too.
I think Holliday thought he had a pitch to hit right there. He was looking for that off-speed pitch, staying back. He sees it and just swings through it. And that's part of what Arroyo does, and we talked about in our open, Dan, is that not only does he throw breaking balls, but he will change speeds on them.
In the air, left center. A line drive shot. How about that? Wow! It gets out of here. A liner. And the Cardinals, with one swing of the bat, take the lead. It barely gets over the wall. May have put a hole in somebody's chest out there. What a rocket off the bat of Holliday.
Tried to wait on the curveball, the pitch before, and he waits on this one and gives the Cardinals the lead. And yeah, there were some afterburners on that baseball as it shot through the gap. I don't think Arroyo can believe that ball left the ballpark.
I don't.
Nor do I.
It's a pretty good 3-iron. And all of a sudden, jolt to the ballpark as Holliday picks up home run number 3, RBIs 15 and 16. How about back-to-back? Here's the 0-1 pitch. Craig, ground ball. Chopper to Votto, spins. Arroyo is there at the bag. And there's 2 away.
So he's trying to wait on the curveball. Wait, and he doesn't catch up to it. This one, wait. I got that one. And there it is, sneaking over the wall. And so many times you see a baseball, Dan, you can just kind of see it dying in the outfield. It just doesn't really carry, and the ball almost loses steam. And this almost had
Little giddy up.
Little giddy up to it. Yeah, like, as you say, like a golf ball, like a 3-iron. It just took off and had another kind of set of burners to it, and Holiday all smiles in the Cardinals dugout. And that's the home run potential we talked about. That's what the power can do for a team. Just turn it around just like that and give the Cardinals the lead.
Matt Holiday, 3rd home run. Bam. A line shot just like that. A little different feel to this game. Matt Holiday, a 2-run homer, the Klondike moment of glory. How about Mike Matheny? This was back in 2004. A walk-off walk to score Albert Pujols against the Chicago Cubs. What a year that was. Right around that time, 2004 is when the team just really took off. That first month they were around 500. After that, without question, the best team in baseball. Here's Todd Frazier. The 1-0 pitch by Garcia. Jaime got a piece of it. Tracks it down to first and got him. Nice play, Jaime Garcia.
Well, Garcia doesn't panic, but he also is quick. Perfect combination, as he knows he has very little time, but quick snap throw just in time. That's not a play you practice, nor can you practice that, Dan. It just doesn't come up naturally. And you wonder why they're checking out Jaime Garcia there. Greg Howe came over to talk to Mike Matheny, and he kind of on the top step there, but it seems that everything's okay. Garcia only at 75 pitches. There's Greg. Chris Conroy on the left, I believe.
So 1 out and nobody on.
That's what a trainer does throughout the game. They have their eyes basically on every player, and they just very aware of players that look like they may be dragging a bit, maybe they're limping a bit. I mean, honestly, the trainers work so hard throughout the course of the season. They're the first ones here at the ballpark giving treatment to whoever has issues. There's Greg.
Out of play.
trainer has to give a report to the manager every day. Here's what I see. Here's who's tender. Here's who's working on. I mean, they just have to keep them informed. That's a really important relationship on a team. The head trainer and the manager. And the trainers have to be very honest with those guys, because if the trainer is kind of saying, oh yeah, I think he's okay, the player doesn't really want me to tell you. It's interesting, Mike Matheny came out this week and said that he's trying to teach Matt Carpenter, now that he's playing every day, to be more honest with him. Don't be such a gamer. Tell me. If you're sore, you're sore, because I want you for the long haul.
2 away. Mesoraco is out number 2, and it brings in Robinson. Catches lower portion of the strike zone. 2 outs, nobody on. And an 0-1 pitch from Jaime Garcia. Make it 0-2. Grounder that's hit to short. Two one. Time to stretch. This copyrighted telecast is presented by the authority of the Cardinals and may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form. And the accounts and descriptions of this game may not be disseminated without the express written consent of the St. Louis Cardinals. Rick Horton is here. Jim Hayes, I'm Dan McLaughlin, and the Cardinals have a 2-1 lead thanks to Matt Holliday. A 2-run homer. Bottom of the 6th. For Holliday, his 3rd of the season. More money raised for the good folks at Cardinal Glennon with that home run. Involved with the Homers for Health program. You can sign up, pledge any amount you want. Glennon.org at Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital, and they do such wonderful work. One ball and 2 strikes.
Matt Carpenter's bounced out a couple of times, and there was some concern with him earlier in the week, Dan, with his side. He tweaked his side a bit, and that brought out the comment by Matheny about being clear about how you feel. But he's really responded well from that. He seems fine, and I know Mike has a great deal of respect for the ability of Matt Carpenter. I'm sure it's tough not to write that name David Freese in the lineup. David's struggling now. There'll be a time where he'll have it all put together, but certainly available off the Cardinals bench here tonight.
Spoils that pitch.
Mentioned the Cardinals head athletic trainer Greg Haug. The assistant trainer is Chris Conroy, but the trainer you saw in our shot earlier is Adam Olson. Pete Prinzi also on the staff as a strength and conditioning coach.
Fly ball out to left, and the catch is made off the bat of Carpenter. I don't think Benji Molina made it to the ballpark today. The Cardinals secondary hitting coach been battling the flu, and when I was down there, roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours, working on some various things that we have going behind the scenes, and they're talking about Benji missing the time potentially tonight. And if he's watching, get back here.
No doubt.
Hope you feel better. Cosma, the fly ball into right. Jay Bruce makes the catch, and there's 2 away.
Wow, almost dropped that baseball. That hit in the palm of his glove. That was not pretty right there, Dan. That could have been very easily a 2-base error.
Here's Descalso. Pitch count not very high for Jaime Garcia. And right now the pitch count only at 73 for Bronson Arroyo. For Jaime, it's at 84. No reason to think at this point that he couldn't, if he's efficient, get through this game as Descalso grounds it up the middle past Phillips and into center field.
Good for Daniel. Boy, that feels good if you're Daniel Descalso right now. He's struggled a bit at the plate, and he knows he's a better hitter than what he's done so far this season. And it's nice to pick up that base knock late in the game. Hard hit ball up the middle past Phillips. Daniel does have a couple of stolen bases. Don't think he would be taken off here with a pitcher at the plate. Like to turn the order over for the 8th.
And Jaime pops it foul.
Arroyo set to lead off the top of the 8th, so this could be his last batter. Sam LeCure. The Cardinals have seen a number of times. Jefferson City, Missouri. And we'll see him in the 8th inning.
Jaime sharply to Phillips, who casually gets the force at second base. Good ball game tonight. 2-1 in favor of St. Louis. Sports update. Eighth inning rolls in. Thank you very much. It's Garcia pitching quite well tonight. 7 hits. But dealing with base runners on, but no damage for the most part, with the exception of the 1 run that he's allowed, and that was to Shin-Soo Choo, a double back in the 5th, and that scored Robinson. And we mentioned a couple of times tonight that Garcia is #1 in baseball. The Cardinals have 3 in the top 5. As far as pitchers that induce the ground ball, Jaime is over 75% coming into play tonight. He has 14 ground ball outs. How about number 15? There it is, 1 away. And Rick, I would assume that that's telling you a lot of late movement, a lot of sink.
And everything's down in the zone. I think that's, again, a key for Jaime Garcia. When his ball is up, it's flatter and it's not moving. And when it's down, it's very difficult to center. And there's the highest ground ball percentage leaders, Dan, you're talking about. And this is in all of baseball. Garcia 1, Wainwright, Westbrook. Westbrook was outstanding his first 2 starts, and he's still been good at 75%. Peralta and Pfister to follow. Round out the top 5, but Garcia getting more and more of those ground balls. You know, you really see Jake Westbrook as a ground ball pitcher and not a strikeout guy. Garcia can be a little bit of both. He can overpower you at times. We saw him do that against the Reds here on opening day, but boy, I like this even better. Ground ball after ground ball.
Head and shoulders whiff package. It's now 16 ground ball outs, but a few strikeouts mixed in as well.
That was a slider. He got Joey Votto in the first inning, part of a 1-2-3 inning there, and picks up 1 against Jay Bruce, gets him looking in the 4th, and his 3rd was Bronson Arroyo. And not a high strikeout day for Garcia, but a very, very good night so far. At the knees again.
3 ground outs off the bat of Zach Cozart. 1 final already in the National League. Atlanta over Washington 8-1.
2 flying outs through 7 2/3 innings. Dan, we got a nice tweet from a Cardinal fan named Dan that was asking if it would be appropriate for us to comment just how good our cameramen and camerawomen do. He noticed that watching a lot of baseball, he just thinks our folks do a great job, and I agree with Dan 100%.
Little tapper. Garcia slipped and recovered to make the plays. He replaces his divot. Looking back at the grass that popped up. Midwest is brought to you by Bud Light. It's the sure sign of a good time. Here we go. And by Ford, the official cars and trucks of the St. Louis Cardinals. Big crowd here tonight. 37,535. 37535. Chevy called to the pen, and it's a right-hander in for Cincinnati. Remember, both these bullpens coming into the series had had their issues. Sam LeCure, the right-hander in to face John Jay, and the first pitch is taken for a ball. The difference in the game so far is the 2-run homer by Matt Holliday in the bottom of the 6th. Ground ball to the right side. Votto race to the bag, and he's there. Rick, you notice on a lot of home runs that are hit, the fans, they get together and they're trying to get that souvenir, a memory of a lifetime. Well, tonight, fans, they would have preferred to leave the ballpark without any broken bones.
Yeah, I think
so. They got out of the way.
I think you got to dive on that one. No question, that ball was smoked by Matt Holliday, and the perfect, Dan, remedy for the woes of the Cardinals offense is to get a big hit, to get a big fly in a key point in this game, and that's what Holliday did. And if I'm a fan, just let it go. Back out of the way. Nobody diving for that one.
Nope. Carlos Beltran takes a strike. on the outside corner. Look at this. That's how you beat that shift. Off the end of the bat. And Beltran picks up a base hit. So let's get you caught up. What's happened tonight? The AT&T U-verse Rewind Holiday, the 2-run homer. Just saw that moments ago. Arroyo, solid outing. His 33rd career start against the Cardinals tonight. And Jaime Garcia, 8 innings. Will he pitch the 9th?
Not sure this was the plan of Carlos Beltran. In fact, I'm sure it was not. But gets the job done, just barely inside the bag at third. And Carlos picks up that 3rd hit of the day. And he really is swinging the bat well, and he has been producing. And he did not feel very well a couple of days ago. You mentioned Benji Molina being ill, but Beltran on his bobblehead doll day played, but didn't feel very good. And so he did not start here in game 1. We saw him in pinch hit role, but it hasn't hampered his swing in.
Runner at first, that's a short lead, and the 1-0 pitch. 2 balls and no strikes. So they put the shift on here for Holiday. All kinds of room to the right side, especially with Votto holding Carlos Beltran. It's another one of those pitches I'm sure that Holiday would love to have back. His eyes lit up.
Holiday knows it, and so does Sam LeCure.
Check on Carlos. Here's a 2-1 pitch to Matt Holliday on its way.
He's not getting cheated, is he?
Nope. Rick, I was on a commercial shoot with Holliday, Craig, and Freeze. This is spring training. Idea was just to throw BP, let them take their swings. It is remarkable how hard Matt Holliday hits the baseball. Now, I know that's an easy statement to make, but when you are there in person and close to it, it's eye-popping.
When you're 60 feet away from it, it's a little different.
Goodness. Ball just jumps off his bat. He is so strong. The 2-2.
There was a time after I was finished playing again and started broadcasting games and doing some radio, doing some TV, that I would throw batting practice. So I threw some batting practice to Mark McGwire and to Albert Pujols, and I got to tell you, I got kind of some chills about that. I mean, that was pretty cool experience to just, even though I threw against other guys that could hit well too, just to see these guys that just crush the baseball. It's really pretty spectacular. It has a different sound when it comes off the bat of a guy that is a plus power guy. And you're very, very concerned about getting behind the screen after you deliver the baseball, because you don't have any time to react. And that's kind of the scary thing about pitching, frankly. And you know, you throw one out over the plate, and Holliday lines one up the middle, you don't have time to duck.
Runner goes at 3-2. Then he stopped, and it's a double play ball. 6-4-3. So the Cardinals and Garcia head to the ninth, leading 2-1.
Lewis coming up after the game on the post-game edition of Missouri Lottery Cardinals Live. Pat Paris will be with the Mad Hungarian. Another solid outing for Jaime Garcia. They'll break it down. We'll re-rack the top plays of the month. Plus, we'll have Mike Matheny's post-game thoughts. Edward Mujica comes on to pitch the ninth for the Cardinals. We head back to the booth. And Dan and Rick, guys.
All right, Jim, thanks. It's one of those decisions that we talk about. A tough one for a manager. When to go to his bullpen. And it's Edward Mujica, 4 for 4 in save opportunities. And Garcia, 8 innings, 7 hits, 1 run. It was earned. No walks, 3 strikeouts, 92 pitches, 70 were strikes. And Mujica will get the heart of this lineup, and it starts with Joey Votto.
One of the decisions that probably went into using Mujica here is when he's good, it really doesn't make any difference left or right, because his big pitch is a split that just goes down, essentially. And he's been red hot. ERA at 1, 4 saves. And it's his role right now, so he's given an opportunity. But he's got the meat of the order, as you say, and this is going to be the toughest guy of the lot to get out, Joey Votto.
Votto has struck out on 3 pitches back in the first against Garcia. A single, and is also grounded out. Mujica has been sensational at times this season. Opponents hitting just 156 against him. The 8 strikeouts. And you'd love to see only 1 walk in his 9 innings of work. Here's a 3-2 pitch.
That's his bread and butter pitch, the split finger. He's going to throw it quite a bit. That's where he gets his outs. Votto, very good understanding of the strike zone.
Just got a piece.
Well, he actually calls his pitch a changeup. Others call it a split, and it really doesn't make any difference. It's the same thing. It's a split change is what it is. His 2 fingers spread out to take some velocity off the ball and has a downward movement to it.
Votto strikes out. Mujica comes back to get him. For us, this is about as much emotion you're going to see from Joey Votto. He was talking to himself at a previous at bat, and he also was ready to snap the bat over his knee.
Seemed pretty amped up defensively too.
Yeah.
We saw him move around quite a bit defensively, going to his left, to his right. Perhaps it's playing the Cardinals that's getting him excited. I know this guy likes to play against the Cardinals.
Phillips looks at strike 1. Here's the 0-1 pitch, taken high and outside, and it's 1-1. Phillips with a pair of base hits. Both have been singles. 1-2. The second game in Washington. And watching Mojica. Incredible in the fact that the ball was just dancing. Here's a 1-2. Rolls foul. Now the Cardinals, this game tonight, the home run by Holiday, and really not a lot of offense. 7 hits and no runners in scoring position.
There's the grip. It's kind of a split grip. He actually has his third finger up a bit on the ball and just really takes velocity off and creates downward movement. So Dan, no runners in scoring position and no strikeouts.
How about that? Mojica, back-to-back Ks to start the night. Over 37,000 will rise to their feet. Budweiser player of the game, Jaime Garcia. 8 innings, 7 hits, the 1 earned run, no walks, and 3 strikeouts. Jaime, the Budweiser player of the game, and what a first month it has been for the entire starting staff. It's down to Jay Bruce. 2 outs, nobody on. Strike 1. Oh, 2. What's the pitch here, Rick?
Got to keep throwing it. That's his pitch.
The 0-2. Ground ball pulled foul. It's another 0-2 pitch. Outfield extremely deep for Jay Bruce. Two and 2. Two-two pitch. Swing and a miss. How about that? Strikes out the side and picks up a big win for the Cardinals. Mojica the save, and the Cardinals take game 2, 2-1.
Outstanding ball game from top to bottom. The Cardinals got good pitching from Jaime Garcia. He goes to 3-1. Fantastic job by the Cardinal left-hander. Mike Matheny pleased, and he can breathe a bit of a sigh of relief as his offense picks up just 7 hits. But the big one, Matt Holliday, 2-run shot in the 6th inning. And Edward Mojica closes it out.
We're on to the post-game show. He strikes out the side here in the ninth. 5 for 5 in save opportunities. What a game. 2-1 the final.